Look at this. I'm starting on time again tonight, 9:30 p.m. Gordon Causey coming live and unscripted. Today is the 26th of November, 2024. I like to say that at the beginning, reference the date, because if I check back later, I sometimes wonder when I've done a video 6 months ago, it's a pain in the butt trying to find out exactly what date it is. Anyway, Candy's here, as is always the case. Come here. Come here. I got attacked today when I came home. But now I'm not getting attacked for affection. I'm getting attacked for everyone should know what. Where did I put it? I've got her bacon treat today. And oh, she loves the bacon treats. Shake, lay down, speak. Come on, give me a good one. Speak, speak. Good girl. Come on up. Show your face. Candy the Wonder Dog. Formerly Candy the Wonder Pup. All right. Before I get going, as always, you know the drill. I see Danny's already here. He's encouraged everyone to give me a thumb up if you like Candy the Wonder Dog. Hey, I can't compete with a Border Collie Aussie Shepherd mix. There's just come on back up. Come on back up. She is an affectionate, loving, pain in the rear end dog at times, because Border Collies, you may have heard, are one of and perhaps the most intelligent dog out there. That doesn't mean they are necessarily obedient, but man, oh man, she needs to be kept busy. And she gets a toy, this little squeaky toy, and she'll throw it at me. So when she needs stimulation. But anyway, that's enough about my dog. If you do like the channel and like what I talk about, it's all not just candy. Animonarchy has shown up. If you do like the channel, if you do like the things I talk about, I always say this, I'm injecting my voice into the public discourse, talking about things that I think matter, and offering up the perspective of a 58-year-old Christian male, straight, white, all the things that get you canceled in today's world and told to shut up and sit down because your opinion doesn't matter anymore. You're not allowed to have a voice. And this is kind of my way of thumbing my nose, although I have to be incredibly careful because my channel has been restricted so many times. I've had videos taken down. I've been given 2-week-long holidays, if you will, because of violating what they refer to as community standards, having the wrong opinions on varying subjects. There's only one opinion allowed with respect to the COVID vaccines. And if you don't hold that opinion, man, oh man, you have to be incredibly careful. The last two videos I have had taken down have had to do with the 8 billion people on this planet. And, the question of whether or not that is too many, is it sustainable? And that has gotten my videos taken down. I'm going to be treading on a little more safe territory right now. I believe it's safer territory. I'm going to be talking about the horrible, pathetic Canadian news media and how they report things. And this is from a story that came out within the last 2-3 days. But before I get going, I also have Sheriff of YouTube is writing Gordo, which is not a name I like. I do not like the name Gordo. I can handle Gord, I can handle Gordy, but I don't like Gordo because I speak enough Spanish to know that El Gordo means fatso. And I look pretty good, for a 58-year-old guy, but I do have a bit of a gut. I could tighten up. I do not have a six-pack anymore, so I've never been a fan of the term gordo. But that being said, I would just ask you to use Gordy, Gord, or my preferred name, Gordon, but whatever. And anyway, Sheriff is telling me that Israel is not part of North America. No, I said it was part of the Western developed world. I did not say North America. I referred to the Western developed world in that last video as being Canada, the US, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, And then I threw in, and maybe Israel. They could be considered part of the Western developed world as well. They are, in my mind, it's a liberal Western style democracy, kind of unique, absolute 100% unique in the Middle East, where you have typically it's more, the theocracy of Iran, the dictatorship of Bashir al-Assad in Syria, those the kingdoms of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Emirate states, the United Arab Emirates. Emirate is just I think it's an Arabic word that means kingdom. Anyway, let me read on. Anna Monarchy said, I've had some temporary Facebook restrictions, so have I, but not for a long time. Facebook has left me alone, but I'm not using the platform as much as I used to for sharing my ideas. Now my thoughts, the stuff that's ruminating around in my tiny little adult human brain. Anyway, and Monarchy was restricted once for apparently bullying, and I have no idea what it could have been about. It's so ironic. The COVID era pushed so many people online. Everyone was not everyone, but a lot of people were already using social media, and then when lockdown measures were brought in place, it became the only avenue for human interaction. Either through Facebook or Zoom or Instagram, and these platforms expanded. It was a boom, an absolute boom for the digital the Metas, the Zuckerbergs of the world got got richer and richer. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer. Sound familiar? Yeah, and Monarchy writes that he was sharing the truth. Sheriff of YouTube writes, LOL, G7, I like her. He likes Iran. Okay. If you're a misogynist, if you're a male chauvinist, Iran has got to be nirvana, because women can't leave the house unless escorted by a male family member. Women have to have their faces covered. I mean, it's a great place if you want to be, if you have this misogynistic outlook. And Monarchy goes on to write, the YouTube comment section censor the worst. Everyone gets shadow banned comments. And I've noticed that. Certain comments do not populate. And it's annoying. It's vexing. And I have this on Top Chat. Let me switch it to live chat. They have this little thing for the chat where if you have Top Chat, it only shows you what they determine to be the top messages. Live chat, you get to see everything, and it defaults to Top Chat. I'm one who wants to see everything. But what's the news that I want to talk about tonight? And I cannot believe this headline. It's from CTV. I'm not going to share it because it seems lately whenever I share a news article, share my screen, that it just goes blank. And I think that may be because of the fact that Canada now has it's Bill C-13, Bill C-16. I forget the exact the exact moniker placed on the legislation, but the Canadian government under Justin Trudeau has brought in legislation that prevents Canadians from being able to share news articles online over platforms like Facebook and maybe now YouTube as well. So I can talk about the news, and here is what the headline says. And this just blew me away. Dozens of people in Canada have scurvy, and it's because of food. And just reading that headline, and let's face it, we know that a lot of people only, when it comes to the news, they only pay attention to, they just scan headlines. They see a headline and they, think they're being informed. And so if you just read the headline of this article, and I'm flipping back and forth, dozens of people in Canada have scurvy, and it's because of food. And you'd be thinking, oh my gosh, we got measles outbreaks, E. coli, triple E, Eastern equine encephalitis. We got COVID, we got RSV, rhinovirus, flu, influenza. Oh my gosh, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And this came out 2 days ago. It was published on November 24th. Last updated at 7:02 a.m. or 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anyway, the article says, this is by Alison Bamford, and it's a disease often thought to only affect 18th century sailors is reemerging in Canada. Oh yeah, dozens of people across Canada have this disease. Oh my gosh, let's read. Earlier this week, doctors identified 27 cases of scurvy caused by prolonged and severe vitamin C deficiency. 27, that is the dozens. When I hear the word dozens, I think of a number under 100, because otherwise it would be 100 plus or nearly 100. So I'm thinking, when I see the word dozens, I'm thinking 36, 48, 60, something in that measure. Not 27. 27 is just 2 dozen plus 3. Why did they say dozens instead of giving the actual number 27? But anyway, I'll read that again. Earlier this week, doctors identified 27 cases of scurvy caused by prolonged and severe vitamin C deficiency in northern Saskatchewan. So we're being told dozens of people in Canada, and it turns out, and that's not strictly inaccurate. They're not lying. It is 2 dozen plus 3 cases, couple dozen, just over 2 dozen cases, dozens. How did they frame it? Dozens of people in Canada. Well, okay, Saskatchewan is in Canada, but it's not even across Saskatchewan. It's just in northern Saskatchewan. Experts say the confirmed diagnosis highlight a broader issue with poverty and food insecurity in rural and remote communities across the country. Well, are there other cases? Do some digging, do some journalism, do some actual reporting. Is this an isolated case or is it not? And then it quotes Dr. Jeff Irvine as saying, vitamin C comes from lots of different food sources, but if you don't get those food sources, the body can't do what it needs to do, said Dr. Jeff Irvine, physician researcher with Northern Medical Services in La Ronge, Saskatchewan, Laronge, 2 words, though obviously a French name, La Ronge. Irvine was asked to help investigate the prevalence of scurvy in his northern community of La Ronge after his colleague confirmed a single case of the disease. Irvine looked back at the last 51 vitamin C blood tests performed on patients in La Ronge over the last 14 years. 50 of the tests took place between mid-2023 and the spring of 2024, with 27 of those results showing low levels of vitamin C. Those blood results paired with physical exam results indicated the 27 patients who were positive for scurvy, Irvine said. The patients' ages range from 20 to 80 years old. Nearly 8 in 10 were Indigenous. I don't know where La Ronge, Saskatchewan is. I don't know Saskatchewan that well. I know Saskatoon, the capital of Regina, North Battleford, and maybe a couple other places. I actually have never been to Saskatchewan. The closest I've ever been is New Westminster or New Westminster, Floydminster. There are 2 cities on the Alberta-Saskatchewan border that are right within half an hour of each other, and I was on the Alberta side, but I've never actually been into Saskatchewan. But regardless, this is garbage journalism. This is clickbait. This is panic porn. This is driving fear into the Canadian population. Let me catch up on what is being said. Okay, so here's where we are. Anne Monarchy writes, rose hips extract, scurvy cured. Scurvy, I'm no expert. What I know of scurvy is what most of us probably know is that sailors used to be subject to it on long voyages because they were not getting any fresh food. They were not getting fresh fruit, vegetables, meat. They were eating dry, they were eating salted, a lot of salted food, and not getting any vitamin C. And actually, when they discovered that vitamin C deficiency was the cause of this seaborne illness, the British sailors they used to carry around limes with them to prevent, they would suck or eat a lime. And that is why Brits are often referred to as limeys. They're called limeys because Britain was probably the greatest naval power, the biggest shipping country, Cabot, I can't think of all the names of all the explorers, all the British explorers, Hudson, Mackenzie, all these explorers went, Franklin, traveling around and all around the world. And the Brits were always brought limes with them. And so people would see Brits and go, oh, they're limeys. And that's where that term comes from. That was an effort to combat scurvy. But the point of this video is that this is just more typical. It shows you why the Canadian mainstream media is dying. And what annoys the heck out of me is that our own government is handing out hundreds of millions of dollars a year for this kind of crappy journalism, this panic porn, this, irresponsible, driving fear, trying to raise people's level of anxiety. I just went through all, everyone's scared of, we've got a significant portion of the population who's still afraid of COVID, afraid of the flu, afraid of RSV, afraid of measles now, what used to be in bygone days a childhood disease that every kid got, like chicken pox. Then there's more recently been this, and this is what the media does. One person in the US, one person out of like 14 or 15 states dies of E. coli because of some tainted carrots. And all of a sudden there's a deadly outbreak of E. coli as reported by Global News. And again, they're part of the media machine that gets hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it's between $300 and $400 million a year of taxpayer money goes for this crappy, horrible journalism. And it's not even journalism. It's panic porn. It is propaganda. It's the sole purpose of this is to drive fear and anxiety in the Canadian population. And there are still millions of Canadians who tune in nightly to the CTV National News, to the CBC, the National, to Global. There are millions of Canadians, probably 4 or 5 million Canadians, paying attention to this, and they think they're smart. They're dumber than a second coat of paint. They're dumber than a bag full of grass clippings, but they think they're smart because they've been informed by the nightly news, and they've been told that scurvy is a major problem of, dozens of people in Canada. No, 27 people in a tiny little northern community in northern Saskatchewan. But they're not going to report it that way. They're not going to report it with the headline saying 27 people in northern Saskatchewan succumb to or are sick with scurvy. Because that's not going to drive fear. That's not going to drive anxiety. When you put a headline up there and it says, dozens of people in Canada have scurvy and it's because of food. They're scaring us already with all the stories of E. coli and listeria. You'll remember that there was, I think it's silk and some almond type, these so-called milk drinks. I mean, I find it hilarious. So almond milk, almonds, it's almond juice. It's soy juice. Milk is something that the female of a species, a mammalian species, produces. Cows, goats, humans, any mammalian species, rats, mice, bats. The female of mammalian species produces milk. An almond produces juice, a liquid. It's not milk. But they can't sell almond juice. They can't sell soy juice because it sounds gross. So they call it soy milk, almond milk. Anyway, we know, there's been the listeria recalls and just making Canadians concerned, worried, anxious about the food supply. That's my take on it. Let me read what is being said before I get on to the next segment of this. How we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're dealing with a media that wants to do that. That is their goal. They want to drive fear. They want to drive anxiety. Because when you have a scared, frightened, anxious population there, one, they're easier to control. And number two, it's bad for your health. That's my opinion. Stress, anxiety, fear, these things over a long sustained period of time are not good for your health, in my opinion. And I think there is literature to back that up, but I'm not going to go sourcing it out right now. Let me read what is being said. And Monarchy's filling things up here. And Cryptomeria is writing that the majority of cases, 27, were from a native band up north. And they said, 80, 90% or something like that were among Native Canadians. And when you're living up north, you're not going, I don't know where L'Orange is, but if it's high enough up in Saskatchewan, the growing season for fresh fruit and vegetables is going to be very short or non-existent. Everything has to be shipped in. The cost is incredibly expensive, prohibitively expensive. So eating well costs a lot of money. And so people opt for ultra processed food that has so many preservatives in it that after you die, you don't need to be, this is just a joke, but so the food we eat has so many preservatives in it that I think Canadians probably don't even need to be embalmed anymore after we pass away, because our body is chock full of these preservatives. And in bygone days, when sailors were out on the ocean, the way they preserved food, salted fish, everything was salted. And I don't have the requisite background, scientific or nutritional or anything like that, but I would suspect that when you salt and preserve food, that it loses its nutritional value. I don't know. We do know that sailors used to experience scurvy, and it wasn't because they were starving to death. They had food on the ship. They would feed the sailors, but the quality of the food they were getting was not sufficient enough to preclude them from getting this disease, scurvy. Let me read on. Danny writes, lemons and limes cure scurvy, hence the British being called limeys, as I said. And Monarchy writes, sometimes I nibble on small pieces of cedar leaves. The native North Americans made cedar, and I think pine tea for the scurvy sailors. Entirely possible. I think there are a lot of home remedies right now. There are a lot of natural homeopathic cures for a lot of what ails us. Unfortunately, when we go to, it seems like the only medicinal remedies we're allowed to take are those that are synthetic derivatives of natural things. Anyway, reading on. Amonarchy goes on to say, I got some pure hemp oil today, and a dropper has 60 milligrams of vitamin C, 100% of the recommended daily allowance. Amonarchy says, which is milliliters, I think. Amonarchy says, vitamin C powder is fairly cheap and tastes sweet and sour and sort of citrusy. That would make sense, because I think oranges are the first thing I default to when I think of vitamin C. I think of oranges. I imagine a lot of people are like that. And then Markey goes on to say you can mix it with water or other drinks for flavor, maybe with some apple cider vinegar. What was interesting in this article is it made a number of references, I think, to meat. I read a couple different, not in this article, not in the one from CTV. I was reading another one saying you can get vitamin C from meat. I don't know whether that's true or not. I have to be so darn careful. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just talking mainly about what the news does and how they want to drive fear, anxiety, panic porn. We saw this in spades during the COVID era. It's public record. We know that rather CBC News Edmonton, and they get over $1 billion from taxpayers. There during the COVID era, during that time when COVID was 24/7. All the reporting, it might have just ignored everything else and just gone full COVID. CBC News Edmonton, their broadcast, they showed a picture in behind on the screen as the newscasters were talking, and the picture was of a patient hooked up to a ventilator in an intensive care unit. The only thing was there were some very eagle-eyed consumers of the news who were watching who screen captured that picture and were able to see that it wasn't a patient, that it was a mannequin. CBC News had shown a picture of a mannequin in an ICU, and the director of CBC News in Edmonton was forced to issue a public apology because that is not ethical journalism. This is what our taxpayer dollars fund. It would be ethical if the announcer, if the newscaster had said, the following image that we're displaying depicts a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator in an ICU. We are doing this to give a visual representation to our viewers of what a patient would look like hooked up to a ventilator in an ICU. But please note, this is not a patient. This is actually a mannequin. If they had done that, that's ethical journalism. Bob's your uncle, everything's good. But they didn't do that. And the director of CBC News in Edmonton feigned ignorance. He said it was a mistake. It was an error in judgment. And I call, pardon the swearing, I call bullshit. You're telling me that the director of the news division, CBC News in Edmonton, didn't take journalistic ethics 101? I didn't take journalistic ethics 101, and I know that. He knew it. Anyway, going on. Wow. Danny's writing, he's obviously looked it up. Or you knew where L'Orange was, which I doubt, but is that it's 400 kilometers north of Saskatoon. Wow. Like that's north. I'll look it up after, but wow. So I don't imagine anyone's got any backyard gardens or anything like that. Let's see, Anna Monarchy is writing, the temporary tax breaks are basically on a bunch of junk food. Yeah. When you go to the grocery store, buy chicken, buy milk, buy bread, buy your staple items, there's no tax on them anyway. That we all know that Justin Trudeau's latest, 2-month GST, HST, the sales tax holiday, it's just a vote grab. It's just trying to prime the pump to get the poll numbers up enough so that he can go and make an early election before he absolutely has to in October of 2025 with some momentum, with the wind in his sails. That's what he's doing. And he knows, those of us who look at this news story of scurvy in Canada and can recognize and I'm sorry, but I have to say it, the bullshit reporting coming out of our mainstream media that we're paying for, $300 to $400 million a year, taxpayer dollars going to the outfits like this CTV and Global and the Toronto Star and National Post and Globe and Mail. You know what? If people are interested in their reporting, if it was quality journalism, they wouldn't need a subsidy, but it's garbage journalism. It's not journalism, it's propaganda. All these groups, our media is corporately owned, corporately controlled now. And I've spoken about it before. When the World Economic Forum meets every February in Davos, Switzerland, they are corporate masters in the corporate world descending on Davos, Switzerland. That includes the corporate masters of our media outlets. And that's where they get their marching orders. That's why the reporting is the same across so many different channels, whether you're watching ABC, NBC, CBS, CBC, CTV Global. Doesn't matter what you're watching, they're all reading the same script. They're all framing things the same way. We've got to build back better. They come up with these that the pervasive spreading of false and misleading information online is a threat to our democracy. And they all say it exactly the same. Why? Because they're all reading from the same script, because they're all beholden to the same masters, and their masters go to Davos, Switzerland every year. They get their marching orders, they come back, and here's how we're reporting things. Scare the population. Get them afraid of their own, breathing the air. And you, me, and everyone else who has our eyes open to this, those of us who our brain hasn't been shut down and atrophied to such an extent that those of us who can still recognize this need to get loud, need to talk. I've had tons of conversations with people on it today, and then I use that as a springboard, but it's nothing new. It's nothing new. It just ramped up exponentially during the COVID era. It existed before the COVID era. We had the Vietnam War era, when there was the Gulf of Tonkin incident blown up into like a major battle. And then we had, the domino theory garbage. And then we had the Iraq, Persian Gulf Wars, where they had the invisible weapons of mass destruction. And Colin Powell went in front of the UN and proved to the world that they had weapons of mass destruction that they never had. Let me read on. Danny writes, more fear mongering, keeping people in a lower frequency that can also cause cancer. I don't know about that. But speaking to a woman I know from church today, there's a guy I know who the cancer has now spread from his kidneys to the heart, another major organ. And another individual just passed away with cancer in the congregation. And this is just happening far too often. And fear, anxiety, panic porn reporting, having people, this is by design. And I got an email the other day, or just yesterday, from someone who comments, who shows up here. She goes by the name HM. Her name is Heather. And she used to have the handle, I think the Townhouse Gardener. And then she changed it to HM, and her name is Heather. And she sent me a wonderful email, very encouraging, really appreciated what she wrote. I'm going to read it. She gave me permission. She said, hello, Gordon. Hope this finds you well. Just caught your stream about the Georgia Guidestones this morning. Thank you. I really find it comforting that you bring into this craziness a biblical aspect. They have ramped up all their conspiracy-based intentions since they threw COVID at us, to the point daily when you go online, it never fails. You find some new way they're trying to entrap and enslave us all into a digital gulag totally under their control. It is truly nauseating and overwhelming, but again, it brings me solace knowing the Bible spells out the evil to us. I do find it hard, though, that many, such as family, do not find anything out of place and are totally accepting of the lies, the chaos, the plans, everything that they're laying out for us. Then she recommended a video that I haven't checked out yet, haven't had time. Also heavily censored for telling the truth. And she gives me a few links. And she goes on to say, I find all this stuff that they are throwing at us to change us, hurt us, enslave us in such a short time so disturbing that sometimes I tell myself that I wish I had lived at a different time in the past. I wish I'd been born into a different era. I think a lot of people, myself included, have played with that notion of wouldn't it have been nice to have been born into my parents' generation. My parents were born in the late 1930s, so they avoided World War II. And being Canadian, if you missed World War II, that's been pretty much it. We did get involved in the Korean War, but that was strictly voluntary. Every war we've engaged in since World War II has been strictly voluntary. Anyway, she goes on to say, I tell myself that I wish I had lived at a different time in the past, that these evil demons could not have the way of technology to mess with our lives. Watching people die or lose everything because of psychopathic, weak people's lies or greed is horrible and not something I thought I would ever have to do. But then again, I would never have sincerely come to Jesus if life had stayed rosy. This is, and a lot of people have seen it this way, this is God calling you home, but not everyone is going to heed the call. And I'm going to save it for my next video, but I'm going to talk, why do some people hear it and some people don't? Why do some people recognize the lies, the deception, the propaganda, and some do not? And I promised Heather I didn't promise her, but I mentioned to her that I'm going to be doing a video on election. There's a doctrine called Calvinism, and Calvinism, there are varying points in it. They spell out the word tulip, total depravity, unlimited grace. And one of them is election. And it's this idea that we are elect. Those who hear Jesus's voice, those that we are the quote unquote elect. But I've also talked in this video before, or during my videos before, about the fact that humanity, we want to put God into a box. We want to give God a name. We want to define God. And one of the ways we do that religiously is by establishing church doctrines. And that's attempting to put God into a box, and you can't do that. God simply is. That's why when Moses said, what name shall I tell your people? What name shall I give them? When I tell them the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob has sent me to set them free, who shall I say sent me? And God just, you're not putting me into a box. I am. That's it. God is. But I want to unpack this doctrine of election, this Calvinistic doctrine of election. I don't ascribe, it doesn't matter to me whether you ascribe to that doctrine or not, but I think it's something worth talking about because there is a biblical foundation for it. There are reasons why this doctrine has taken root in Presbyterianism, Reform-based churches, any church that is Calvinistic. And we've all heard of the Calvinistic or Protestant work ethic. And it's this idea of election. And I think I don't think you need to ascribe to this doctrine to have salvation in Jesus Christ. But I think it is something worth exploring, and I'm going to do it in my next video. Let's see. Danny's writing that broccoli has more vitamin C, getting back to the subject line of this video. Broccoli has more vitamin C than oranges. Yeah, but oranges taste better. And Danny writes, I only fear God. And that's it's one of those difficult things. Who would not prefer the easier path? Who would not prefer to forego anxiety, fear, we're told in Scripture to put on the full armor of God. Get your sword, your shield, your helmet, gird up your loins, prepare, put on the full armor of God. I just as soon not need armor. I would just as soon be able to live peacefully, freely, without having to worry about girding myself up and putting on helmet, sword, shield, spear, and all the rest. I don't want to go to war. Who wants to go to war? But this is the situation we're in. This is where we've been placed. And in many ways, I think I'm lucky. I'm actually glad to be alive, because I think I'm going to see some amazing stuff. But I have to endure. That's another word from the Bible. It comes out regularly. Endure. Those who endure. Read Revelation. Those who endure to the end. Don't walk out. Please don't walk out. And let me see. Danny writes, how do you milk an almond? Guess they have really, yeah. There is no almond milk because there are no almond teats. There has to be, to get milk, you need a teat. Or a nipple, if you prefer that word. Crypt America writes to put cheddar cheese on your broccoli, and then you're getting double vitamin C. Wow. According to Danny, it's $10 for a bell pepper in Nunavut. That's Canada's newest territory. Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut. I always joke and say, they ask the people, "What we're creating a new territory. What part of the territories do you want?" And the people up in that area said, "We don't want none of it." And that's how it got the name, Nunavut, or Nunavut. And the capital is Iqaluit. And Denny's giving the prices $30 for a gallon of milk, $25 for a 3.5 liter Tropicana orange juice. It's insane. There was that TV show Bearskin Airlines, Buffalo Airlines. I forget the name of it exactly, but they flew into these remote northern communities, and they had a kind of a reality TV show based on the airline. And I remember there was an episode where the owner of the airline, his son, wanted to make him a cake. And he made him one of those bunt style cakes. And he even made the icing in the green color, corporate color of this Buffalo airline. And he had to buy eggs and flour and sugar. And he bought all the ingredients. And then he gave his dad this cake, as well as a bill for what he had paid for all the ingredients. And it was somewhere around $100 to bake this cake, to get the ingredients required to bake this cake. It's insanely expensive up north. Now, because it's so insanely expensive, people who do work up there are remunerated. They're paid very well. They call it isolation pay. There are tax benefits as well, lower levels of taxation, but it's still insanely expensive. Crypt Mary writes, eggs were dipped in wax. You can save them for months without a refrigerator. Okay, never knew that. Yeah, Anna Monarchy writes that raw meat has vitamin C. I read a couple articles on this scurvy story, and there was one article talking about fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits are all good sources of vitamin C, but there are some people sadly lacking in those basic requirements, so they're not eating well. And diet is hugely important to health. There's a guy named David Katz. He's a Yale medical doctor. He's the former president of the U.S. Centers for Lifestyle Medicine. And according to him, and I'm not going to dispute, I'm not going to argue with him, he said that the 5 main drivers of health are, firstly, your genetics, which you have no control over. This is what Dr. David Katz said, not me. And his name is spelled K-A-T-Z or K-A-T-Z, Dr. David Katz. He said, number 1 is genetics, and you can't do anything about it. It's a lottery. But the other 4 things he mentioned, you have some control over. One was get enough sleep. diet, eat well, exercise, and the last one was manage stress. He said if you do those 4 things well, your health outcomes are going to be better than if you manage those poorly. Your genetics, you can't do anything about that. That's a lottery. I'm just reading, Danny's writing, when will we stop paying CBC News to lie to us? We're not, and it's not just CBC. We're also paying CBC, CTV, and Global, and all the newspaper outlets, Can West and Post Media. I forget the name of all the newspaper chains in Canada. In radio, television, we're lied to on radio, on television, and in print. It's propagandistic media. And that's why YouTube is exploding. That's why, a guy like me can garner, even if it's not a big following, people are shutting down the media. And that is unfortunate because there are a lot of irresponsible YouTubers, a lot of irresponsible alternative media outlets out there as well, because everyone's hooked on engagement. They want to drive clicks, they want to drive views, they want to drive sponsor memberships, they want to drive revenue, and they're beholden to the almighty dollar. And so they frame things, and we see it all the time. Clickbait, clickbait, clickbait. And nuance is gone. Just everything's all about being bombastic. And maybe I'm guilty of that to a degree as well, although I don't monetize. I don't, nothing on here, no. I just like people to subscribe and to hit the like button, because that, as I understand it, that increases my channel's exposure and allows me to inject my voice and amplifies my voice a little. I'm a pipsqueak little voice to begin with, and that will make it sound just a little bit louder. It'll spread just a little bit further. And hopefully if I do keep growing, if I can spread this word, God's word, hallelujah, because this is the antidote. Forget pharmakia. This is the antidote. This life that we're living is coming to an end for all of us. I don't know when the end times are, but I do know this. Every one of us has an end time. Everyone with us has an appointment. We have an appointment with the creator of all things, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not, this life is not the end. That you have an appointment at the end of this life, and you're going to stand before the maker, before the creator. And what are you going to say to him? What is he going to say to you? I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to point to the cross, because I know I have a mountain of sin that needs to be covered. And otherwise, I'm lost. I'm like the thief on the cross who, Jesus was being cursed out. And then the one thief said, we are here because we earned it. We deserve it. We're getting what we are due. This man did nothing. And then he asked Jesus to remember him when he came into his Father's presence, when he came into heaven. And Jesus said to the man, that man on the cross, he said, today you will be with me in heaven. What did he do to earn it? Nothing. Let me read on. Danny says that he has been to Lac L'Orange, did a canoe trip with an all-boys school, SGSA, Lac L'Orange, to Flin Flon, Manitoba. 600 or 700 miles in 3 weeks. We were all 14 or 15 at the time, summer of 1990. Wow. That's an adventure beyond anything I've had in that respect. 600-700 kilometers, portaging and canoeing. Wow. I'm going to look up that route. That is something. You should do a video talking about that. Amonarchy writes, at Cryptomeria, I hadn't heard that about eggs, but I've left them outside in the summer for a week or maybe more, and unrefrigerated indoors for probably at least a few weeks, maybe, or even a month even. I know I've let eggs go and I've eaten them and I've been fine. Anyway, and Monarchy's saying they were still okay. And Danny's talking about these aggressive cancers. I know just too many cases myself. I'm going to use the term aggressive cancer just to be careful, not the word that Danny wrote, because there are some professionals saying that word, it doesn't exist, that they're just aggressive cancers. And Monarchy writes, good thing we weren't suckered into and Monarchy's checking out the actual definition. Eat Me writes, a broccoli is so tasty. I don't mind broccoli, but I prefer oranges. Oranges have sucrose. They have sugar, naturally fructose. That's the word, fructose, fruit sugar, but it's sugar. And Danny is quoting another line from Paul. You love the letter. You love Paul's letters. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. That's not exactly the biblical quote, but Paul writes of that same thing in his letters to the churches that he corresponds with. Eat Me is writing, Nunavut is between Quebec and Northwest Territories. No, it goes Yukon, Northwest Territories, and then Nunavut. And so that's across the northern, the northern part of Canada. So Nunavut is quite large, and it's pretty much all of northern Quebec touches, I think, Nunavut. I don't think any of the Northwest Territories does. I don't think so. It's not really between Quebec and the Northwest Territories. It's more just over top of Quebec, basically. Danny writes, Arctic Air on CBC. We Eat Me. Yeah, Danny's writing, Nunavut is northern Quebec, right? Eat Me is writing that caramelized Brussels sprouts and bacon grease is divine. I've tasted Brussels sprouts, but I've never tried them caramelized in bacon grease. There's an old saying in food service, and they say, if you fry it, they will buy it. Fry anything. And if you fry something in bacon grease, maybe I'll have to retry Brussels sprouts. My little guy just tried them for the first time, within the last month or so. And when he got into the juice that was at the end, he was like, whoa! And that's what I remember. Eat Me writes, Catholicism dictates that when you confess your sin, you are golden. Nothing is that easy. That is why I lost my faith way back then. The one thing about Catholicism is, you're golden, but then you're still going to purgatory anyway. And then your relatives can go and light a devotional candle, dropping $2, $5, $10 into the little box, so that your soul will get elevated out of purgatory and into heaven. And I always find it funny when you go into Roman Catholic churches, sometimes they'll have small little candles and bigger candles, and the small ones might be $2 and the big candles are $5. And I've always joked and say, what is God sitting up in heaven going, oh, no, don't look after those little $2 candles. We got to look after the guys who paid the $5. Got to look after the big candles before we look after the cheapskates who only paid for $2. I mean, that was one of Martin Luther's major criticisms of Rome back when he nailed his thesis statement to the cathedral door in Germany, was that the church was selling indulgences, and that was getting to heaven free. Pay to get into heaven. It was because they were going through a big building phase in the 1600s or 1500s. They were going through this major building and they needed cash. So here, get into heaven, buy an indulgence. And that's where we get the term indulge yourself, go crazy, do what you want, because you bought an indulgence from Rome and you had a get into heaven free card. Or you could buy an indulgence on behalf of a deceased relative and get them out of hell or get them out of purgatory and elevate them into heaven. Just keep the money flowing. There are some, with that being said, there are some amazing Roman Catholics, and even, Rome has their doctrine. And I think there are a lot of people in the Roman Catholic Church, a lot of Roman Catholics, who are able to look past the doctrine and are amazing representatives of Christ, irrespective of the doctrine that Rome has. Rome will tell you, many Roman Catholics will tell you that they were never encouraged to read the Bible, that they were told it's too heavy, too complex, you can't understand it, you'll be led astray, you need us to guide you. They do not believe in sola scriptura, which means faith. They're the five solas: faith alone in Christ alone, based on scripture alone. They don't believe that. They believe that the Pope supersedes anything written in the Bible, because he's Christ's representative on the earth in his Pope mobile and his beautiful attire, But I still think there are amazing Christians in the Roman Catholic Church. Just reading. And Danny's going on to say that he also did Fort Mac to Yellowknife the year before, through rapids on the outside of Fort Smith, Alberta. Wow. And Binary Speaking is back, and she's written something in what looks to me to be Hebrew, but I don't read Hebrew. When I was growing up in New Jersey in the 1970s, we lived in a very Jewish part of the state, Bergen County. My parents had chosen to live there specifically because PTA, Parent Teacher Associations, the community has such a say in the curriculum, and they're very engaged in the educational system. And my parents actually chose to live in an area with a significant Jewish population because they thought the schools would be better. And all my Jewish friends growing up, I forget how often they had to go, but they had to go to Hebrew school. They had to go to learn Hebrew. All I ever learned, we sang at Hanukkah. We would sing, "O Hanukkah, come light the menorah, come gather round and we'll all dance the hora." I remember that song. And the other one was, "Dreidel, dreidel, dreidel, I made you out of clay, and dreidel, 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 and with you I will play." Hey! And Hava Nagila. HM is here. HM, I already referenced your email. And I'm going to be doing that on a separate video because this one's gone on too long already with respect to the doctrine of election. That's going to be my next video. I'm going to be talking about the doctrine of election. And I think it's important. I hope some people will show up because I think there is some value in, I'm not bound by doctrine. But I look at everything, and I can see some beneficial aspects to this belief in election that God has chosen. And I'm going to speak to it in some detail in my next video. So hello to Heather. And Danny saying there is a movie in 2 parts on YouTube, National Film Board, St. John's School of Alberta, Part 1, and National Film Board, St. John's School of Alberta, Part 2. And he is in it, as well as his classmates from all the way back in 1990. Danny writes that the Pope is a joke. I have no particular use for the man, but I pray for him. I mean, we've got to remind ourselves, our job is not to sit in judgment, but to pray. I mean, I'm going to be asking God to forgive a lot on my, I have fallen so far short that I'm far be it for me to sit in judgment on anyone. Justin Trudeau, the Pope, Joe Biden, whoever. Um, Binary speaking. Oh, the word is, I guess what she wrote in the Hebrew is shalom, peace. Eat Me is writing, what is the concept of hanging in limbo? Something we were told about unbaptized kids that died before the baptism celebration. This whole idea of purgatory, limbo, that you're not in heaven, but you're not in hell, you're in purgatory, and your soul is being cleansed. And then shalom. And again, I don't know what those letters are. I know Aleph, I know Gimel, I know a couple. I think those are the only two letters I can name in the Hebrew alphabet. Amonarchy writes, I guess limbo is the same as similar to purgatory, which I think is like a temporary lesser hell. Yeah, you're not in heaven, you're getting cleansed. And I would defy anyone to show me a passage in the Bible or anywhere where Jesus speaks of purgatory. When the thief on the cross, today you will be with me in heaven, but first you're going to spend a few hours in purgatory because this is the way things work. No. Amonarchy writes, where souls are confined temporarily to atone for lesser sins. Okay. Keith Wilson, or Kath Wilson, pardon me. Kath Wilson is here, another Ontarian. Amonarchy, so I knew what you meant. Binary is saying hi to Kate. I wonder, do you know each other? Danny writes, we are to pray for our enemies, and yes, we are. I mean, that, yeah, and it's difficult to do that. It's not easy. Jesus commands us to love those who hate us. That's a difficult thing to do. And that's why it's important to be in God's word every day. I'm right now making my way through the Bible again, and I'm coming to the end of 2 Samuel, and I forget whether it's Kings or Chronicles that comes next, but working my way through in it every day, or pretty much. Don't worry about spelling. Binary says, I do know some of the letters. It's cool that I know some. She's learning Hebrew, new to learning the Hebrew language. I don't know much. I know Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. I probably know more Yiddish, Yutz, Putz. I know a lot of Yiddish words. Tukus, it's a Yiddish word. And evening, Kath. I'm just reading up on what's being written in the live chat. And Kath Wilson found my video about Mormonism and Freemasonry, and there's quite a connection there. I think there's a lot of deception that's going to be foisted on the world. I mean, trying to tie this back to the subject line, talking about how they're trying to frighten the population in Canada about scurvy being everywhere, 27 cases in a very specific northern community in Saskatchewan, and all of a sudden it's dozens of Canadians, suffering from scurvy. Now it's 27 people in a very one specific place. It's not like pervasive. It's not the way they're reporting it. There's a lot of deception in the world right now. And, the whole idea, my difficulty with the Mormons is that I've known a number of Mormons. I don't know any currently, not that I'm aware of. Except for one guy, a customer at the store where I work. He comes in and with his family of like 9 kids. Unbelievable. Mormons have big families. And it's tough to criticize Mormons for their lifestyle or nigh on impossible, because they are genuinely loving, caring, decent people. The doctrine, though, one thing that bothered me is that what they call the first presidency of the Latter-day Saint Church of the Mormons, based out of Salt Lake City, they strongly recommended everyone to follow all the guidelines that were coming from the government, all of them. Roll up your sleeve, get your jabs and your boosters. Wear masks, keep social distance, do everything the government tells you. And that's part of LDS theology, is that they view the United States of America as kind of being the new promised land, that God has ordained a special place for the United States of America. And so the government of the United States of America is likewise godly ordained. And so whatever they tell you to do. And I do know that it created something of a division within the Latter-day Saint Church, because a lot of Latter-day Saints, a lot of Mormons, like a lot of Canadians, Americans, and people all around the world said, no, 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 that they had questions. They weren't following blindly what their government said. And we all know the government lied to us over and over and over again. You know, government, health, even health officials, even Anthony Fauci told us that the SARS-CoV-2 virus came from a wet market in Wuhan, China, and that was a lie. So many lies. And where the thing that concerns me, and Kath has shared my video to her Facebook. Thank you, much appreciated. This may not be the best one, because I tend to go all over the place, but this is even more so than normal. But what worries me, concerns me with the Mormon Church, is this bowing down to authority and where it's going to lead us. Because we talk about Revelation chapter 13 and the mark of the beast and what is coming. And if you want to be a fully participating member of society, you have to take the mark either upon your hand or your forehead. I look upon that as being a representation of everything you do, everything you think, thought, this whole idea of Orwellian thought crime. You're going to be bound to a power, you're going to be bound to the prince of this world. And we see so many manifestations of it: CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, digital IDs. We have people now already having chips implanted in their hands, and they can go into Amazon-style food stores. What's that, Whole Foods or something like that in the U.S., and you can now just pay by swiping your hand. This is scary stuff. And more and more people are waking up, but we need more and more people to wake up. And the difficulty is, if you put a video up on Rumble, on Odyssey, on one of these alternative outlets, it immediately gets looked at askance by a large segment of the population. At least if it's on YouTube, there's a tendency to think, well, YouTube's moderated, so, and they take stuff down all the time. Whereas Rumble is the Wild West. You can say whatever the heck you want. You can say that the earth is made of green cheese and state it as fact. And you can say all kinds of crazy stuff on there. So that's why I tend to stay away from those alternative platforms, is because they're regarded in a very pejorative fashion by a lot of people. Just reading up. Binary speaking, LDS sounds like they don't know how to test all things. The thing is, I talk about often the passage in John, 3rd, 4th chapter, early on in the Gospel of John, about Jesus meeting the woman at the well. Jesus meets the woman at the well, and she's a broken, fallen woman, broken, fallen creature, just like all of us. And she's a Samaritan, and Samaritans worshipped on the mountain because they were kind of half Jewish, and they were precluded from going into the temple. They were considered ritually unclean. They were unclean, not allowed to go into the temple. And Jesus said to her, the time is coming and is now here when the Father is seeking those who will worship in spirit and in truth. And I tell you that the day is coming and nigh is here that Neither on the mountain nor in the temple will you worship, but spirit and truth. And with Mormons I have known over the years, clean living, loving, caring. You talk about fruits of the Spirit, they seem to have an awful lot of them, and in a lot of cases more than myself. So I'm not going to sit, we're to be discerning, but not judgmental. It's this tension in the world, but not of the world. There's a lot of tension there. And that's the way it has to be. Because if the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it. It's got to be jagged. There has to be pitfalls. This is the way it has to be. Any meaning for this life to have any meaning, there has to be this struggle. Otherwise, what's the point? Just going to read on. HM is writing that she's afraid that so many will comply and not see the digital gulag. And we have to remember that we are not home. This is not our home. That the early church was built on the blood of the martyrs, who wouldn't bow the knee, who would not, confess the emperor as God, who refused to renounce their belief in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And that built the church. The church was built on the blood of the martyrs. 10,000 plus Christians were killed by Rome, the same Rome that later took over Christianity in around 350, 380, I forget exactly what year, AD, took it over. And then they had murdered Peter, the Apostle Peter. They'd murdered him, and then they built a church on top of his bones. And they said, well, remember when Jesus said, Peter, your name is Peter, and that means rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. Well, we killed him, and then we built a church on top of his bones. So we're God's true church. And this is where replacement theology took hold, or it really took firm root, because now Rome said, we're the new Jerusalem. We are now God's chosen. Anyway, let me read on. Kath is writing. I like what Danny said earlier. I missed it. He said, whatever the government says to do for your own good, do the exact, it sounds like a Seinfeld opposite. Do the opposite. Do the opposite. It's called being a contrarian. Being a contrarian, and what you have to watch out for, in my experience, when it comes to being a contrarian, meaning going against the stream. If everyone's going right, you go left. If everyone's going uphill, you go downhill. This is just avoiding the herd. You have to look for the extremes when it's just overdone. And then, because sometimes the majority is right, sometimes. But when there's an overwhelming push to get everyone moving in one direction, that's when I find it's best to say, wait a minute, this is just too much. So reading on. Kath is writing, the body of Christ is being deceived by so many false teachers, false doctrines, and the occult has infiltrated the church. There is so much apostasy, and there always has been. There was apostasy in Jesus's own time. Remember the battles that he had daily with the scribes and the Pharisees, and yet, when Jesus did a healing, he would tell the healed person to still go in, and the leper who was healed, go and make the offering as required by the law of Moses. And he did not want people to get kicked out of the synagogue, because that was the community of faith. Even though it wasn't perfect, and nothing on this side of the veil ever will be, Jesus did not want people to be removed from the synagogue, because that could happen if you didn't follow the rules, if you didn't obey the Pharisees. Jesus told his disciples, and he told the people, he said, do as they, obey them, but do not as they do, because they are hypocrites. So you're to obey them. They've been placed in authority. You're to obey them, but don't do as they do. again, this tension, this, things are not easy. This in the world, but not of the world, discerning, but not judgmental, you know, obeying the authority, but not behaving in like manner, not being hypocritical. Binary rights, I think more and more people are waking up, but they're not speaking up. We need to speak up. Recent polling for 2025 Canadian elections show Conservatives in a majority lead. We need to be vocal. We need to be loud. And we need to be reasonable. And we have to use our ears. We have to listen to people and meet people where they're at and talk to them. I had a conversation with a gentleman today. I know his full name. I'm not going to say it. Frank was his first name. And we were talking about what I was talking about, this reporting on scurvy. And I used that as a springboard to talk about other aspects of the reporting that goes on in our crappy journalistic outfits, and you can't trust them on anything anymore. And this is a guy wearing a mask. So you know where his frame of context is. And I don't know him well enough. He's just someone I see come into the shop every now and again. But at some point, hopefully, I'll be able to have that conversation. I've had it with others about the mask, and I'm seeing too many of them on people's faces now. But with all the reporting about RSV and COVID and flu and scurvy and Eastern equine encephalitis and goodness knows what else, E. coli, everyone's scared of health right now. And, oh, I got to do something. And they throw a diaper on their face. Danny's writing, I'm praying and waiting for my father to call me back home. We're to be like Joseph. Joseph found himself in Egypt, living in the wrong country, serving the wrong master, wearing the wrong coat, married to the wrong woman. And yet he advanced God's kingdom. He just worked away. He had faith. He had faith when he named his children. He gave them two names, Manasseh and Ephraim. Ephraim he named because God had made him fruitful in the land of his affliction. That was the way Joseph saw the land of Egypt. It was the land of his affliction. That's why he gave his one son the name Ephraim. And the second name of his child, his son, was named Manasseh. And Manasseh means I've forgotten the troubles of, I've forgotten all my troubles. I've forgotten my past difficulties. I've let things go. I've let things go. And that's the Joseph story in the Bible. Joseph, Andrew Lloyd Webber famously made it into Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, about Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers and ended up in prison, and then eventually was elevated and became the number 2 most powerful man in what was then the most powerful nation empire in the world, Egypt, ancient Egypt. And number 2 most powerful guy, second only to the Pharaoh. And yet he viewed Egypt as the land of his affliction. And he named one of his children Manasseh, meaning I let those past things go. And I think that's a big lesson for a lot of us today, is we got to let things go. I have to. I got to preach this to myself as much as anyone, because I can hang on to things just as well as anybody can. And I find it very difficult to let things go. And what happens when you refuse to let things go is they start to define you. You become characterized. I'm a victim. I'm a survivor of this abuse. I'm a survivor of that. And we identify ourselves with a story that has no bearing on us. It's not the story that God has for us. God has a story for us. God had a story for Joseph in that tale at the end of the book of Genesis. That's the closing of the book of Genesis. I think it starts in and around chapter 35, goes right to the end. And I think it's one of the most powerful stories there's so many powerful stories in the Bible. And I wish we lived in a culture that was more biblically literate, but we don't. Does everyone here know the story of Joseph? And I would encourage you to read it, even just that portion where Joseph is the favored son of his father Jacob, also known as Israel, from whence we get the 12 sons. I don't want to go into it. I've gone on too long already, an hour and 20. Binary writes, we are to obey our leaders until it goes against the word of God. And that's where things, at what point is that? The government told everyone to stay home. They're an authority. Is that disobeying God to stay home and not go and worship? You read Ecclesiastes, there's a time to gather and a time not to gather. Things can be difficult. I know a lot of people, professing Christians, who were all in on obeying government authority because of what it says in Romans chapter 10 and one of Peter's letters about obeying the authority because they are placed there by God. Binary writes, we are to pray for our government as well. They are people too in a fallen world, often lost as lost can be. We should look at them with compassion. God created them too and died for their sins. Amen. Amen. We are to pray for them. And that's, something we have to remind ourselves of. To pray for our enemies. Pray for those who hate us. Pray for those who persecute us. We're to be different. We're to be different from the rest of the world. The common rule in the world is if someone hates you, you hate them back. The Christian attitude is to take that hate and respond back with love. Kind of goes against human nature, though. Binary thinks I have a lot of Bible knowledge. I'd have to give you my testimony. I should share it on here again. I got baptized. I didn't get baptized until August of 2021 in a Pentecostal church. And I wasn't brought up Pentecostal. I was brought up more Presbyterian and Reform-based. It's a long-winded story. But when I got baptized, full immersion baptism, I gave my testimony to a church, and there were actually, 150, 200 people there in attendance, and most of whom were there because there was a former Hells Angels biker with all, gave me a chance to feel like, you, as you're going to the waters of baptism, you're being made clean. You're going into the water as a dirty, sinful creation. Then it's a representation of, you're being reborn as a new creation, being washed clean by the blood of the Lamb. But there's this biker guy, who, my sins do not compare to his, but doesn't matter. But anyway, so I went up and I gave my testimony, and it's available here on YouTube. I've shared it before. Maybe I'll share it again. Evangel Pentecostal church, but they have a lot of videos on their channel. Kath Wilson is saying Hebrews says not to forsake the assembly of the church, not to forsake the gathering as has become the habit of some. I remember that well. I have it highlighted. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another up, to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And that is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. That's the highlighted portion. I highlighted that all the way back in 2020 when we were being told that, oh, it's just too dangerous. And a church, that Pentecostal church here in town, opened up their door, didn't open their doors. They opened up their back lawn to outdoor worship. And it was amazing because we were all hugging and doing everything that the government told us not to do. And we found out that I could hug people and no one was getting sick and no one was dying. Just read on. Blah, 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 blah. Danny, pray for everyone. Kath is saying exactly, pray for our leaders, pray for everyone. Danny's asking, what's the name of the church that my friend runs? That's Dr. George Antonios in Montreal. It's a Baptist church. I think it's called Faith Baptist Church. I'd have to check it again. I'll email it to you. I've got your email address. Biner is asking if it's on my channel, the testimony. No, it's not. It's on Evangel, Brighton Evangel Church, BEC. It's on that station. And it's it's got to be 2 hours long because there were 3 of us getting baptized that day. Binary says, yes, meeting together in person, not remotely online, although online has its place for some people. The way I always looked at it, and I've always said this, is that when you watch that TV station of a fire log at Christmas time, it's like trying to get heat from that. Doing online church is like trying to get heat from that fireplace log television station at Christmas time. There's no heat. There's no warmth. Online is just too antiseptic. Keith is writing, I attend a Baptist church and my pastor is very awake, so blessed. I went to a Baptist church for 4 or 5 months, from March, April 2021 until the summer, March, April, May, June, for about 4 months. And Hill City Baptist, amazing, no masking, no distancing, none of the nonsense. Alex Klusterman is the pastor, and I find I have a heart that's very attuned to the Baptist tradition, the Baptist faith tradition. I find very comfortable. It feels right. The only thing is, I don't live anywhere near a Baptist church. And I don't want to be driving 40, 45 minutes. I want to be in community with people in the town I live in. This town that I live in doesn't have a Baptist church. We've got Anglican, Catholic, Reformed, Pentecostal, United, Anglican, Roman Catholic. I don't know if I said that one already. We've got 7 or 8 different denominations in town, but no Baptist. So what am I going to do? Yes, please, Danny's saying you can email me. Send me the links to the videos. I would love to watch that. And tell me how I can identify you in the videos. Back in the day, it'd be like, God, if you took me back into 1990, or, I took a summer French immersion course in the 80s, Shippagan, New Brunswick, and with my hair down to 17 years of age, hair down to my shoulders. Anyway, God bless everyone. I've got to wrap things up. I've got to work in the morning. So as I like to end all my videos, may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. Receive these words, and may the Lord grant you peace. And if you invite him in, he will grant you peace. And more importantly, when you come to that appointment, when that end comes, he's gone ahead to prepare a place for you. So God bless, and we'll see you all. The next one I'm going to be talking about is election, this Calvinistic doctrine. God bless.